Hey horror fans, welcome back to room 237, and yeah, doing something a little different with the lighting in this video. My girlfriend fell asleep on the couch, so I'm trying not to turn any lights on. But I actually really like how this looks, so I'll probably do this kind of lighting in the future. But it does kind of fit perfectly with the film I'm going to be talking about, which is not a horror film, it's actually a comedy. And to me, it's one of the funniest movies ever made. And it's a spoof film, it's a parody film, and at that, I think it is the greatest parody ever made. And that is Mel Brooks's Young Frankenstein. Love this movie. It If you follow my channel, you'll know that I'm a huge fan of Universal monster films. In particular, Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, and this movie parodies not just those two films, but the whole style of like 1931, mostly 31, like filmmaking and sort of gothic horror. And the reason why I'm really driving home the point of how good of a spoof and a parody this is because I've always been a fan of parodies. I mean, South Park is still my favorite show of all time. I love stuff by Mel Brooks. I love stuff by Zucker and Abrams. But parody is no longer parody anymore. Like, anything with the word movie in the title, other than maybe the first few Scary movies, I think is absolute horseshit. I mean, if you like it, to each their own. I know people that do, but where is it, like the Seltzer Brothers or some shit? Disaster movie, superhero movie. I pick all that bullshit where they just watch trailers, then just like, oh, let's put Lil Jon in there. Let's put Iron Man in there. They don't even, like, this is an actual parody where you reenact scenes and characters in a funny way. That's a good parody. And it makes you appreciate the source material even more because you're able to laugh at it. And I mean, the original and Bride of Frankenstein are two of my favorite movies of all time. And that's pretty much the main. So, sorry about that glare. That's not helping anything. But see if I can just divert that a little bit. Yeah, good enough. You know, it really sticks with like the Karloff era of Frankenstein. Not really son of, just the original and Bride of. But this is actually a movie. I've never owned this before now, and I was just watching the features tonight. This has a ton of features, a bunch of like great little featurettes, and I did not know that this was actually the brainchild of Gene Wilder, who was a comic genius and a brilliant actor. Passed away a few years ago, which sucks, but you know, I always thought this was just a Mel Brooks movie, and Brooks did co-write this with Wilder, but this was all pretty much Wilder's baby. They were working on Blazing Saddles, and he thought of the scene in Bride of Frankenstein where the monster's with the blind man, and just thought, you know, if the blind man goes to pour him soup, he misses the bowl and it lands in his crotch, and it's all hot. And he thought that right there could be, you know, that's where he just came up with, you know, parroting the first two Frankenstein movies. And it's kind of hard to review comedies because comedy is the most subjective genre out there. And pretty much, you know, if it's a good review, you're just going to be sharing all the bits that you think are funny. But, you know, there's just so much to like about this movie. And the story, even though it's a parody, it's still its own story because it's not Victor Frankenstein. Well, the original Universal films it was Henry Frankenstein, but it's the grandson who he wants nothing. He too is a scientist, but he wants nothing to do with the Frankenstein name and the embarrassment that's been caused with reanimating the dead, creating monsters. It's pronounced Fronk-on-steen. But then he inherits the estate, which is in Transylvania, which, I mean, I'm guessing that is just to give it a place, like give it a setting, and also just like a nod to Dracula, I'm guessing. And just from there, it's like he gets there and he meets his hunchback assistant, which of course is Igor, which that sort of become like a big thing associated with Frankenstein films, which in the original Frankenstein, it wasn't Igor, it was Fritz, played by Dwight Frye. It wasn't until Bela Lugosi played Igor in Son of Frankenstein. That's what it was. Son of Frankenstein was the first Igor, but of course it's pronounced Eyegore. Eyegore. And he stumbles upon his grandfather's lab, and in his diary he finds out it is possible to reanimate the dead, and you just get all these scenes that were like, that's why this is a good parody film, because you watch this, you can have the scenes of the source material in your head, and you're like, oh, that was done well. It's a funny version of it. It's not like, oh, let's just put everyone in fat suits and do the milkshake song. Then throw Lil Jon in there. Like, have a scene of the Pirates of the Caribbean and then Lil Jon's on there. No. And this is a all-star comedy for like the 70s. I mean, you got Gene Wilder, you got Marty Feldman, the original Crazy Eyes, as Eyegore, Peter Boyle as the monster, which I watched a lot of Everybody Loves Raymond as a kid, so I loved Peter Boyle as the monster. Terri Garr as Inga, Madeline Kahn as Elizabeth, Kenneth Mars as the inspector, who I don't really remember this from any Frankenstein movies. I feel like it's more of a nod to Dr. Strangelove. But this harsh German inspector who has like this prosthetic arm that he has to keep operating himself. And of course, Cloris Leachman as Frau Blucher. Whatever you say her name, the horses outside day. Who I wonder if she is sort of like a reference to the a Minnie, the Una O'Connor character from Bride of Frankenstein. Don't know why, but that's just what she reminded me of. And just Gene Hackman plays the blind man, and just all they really did take all the classic scenes from those first two masterpiece Frankenstein films. Again, two of my all-time favorite films, and remade them in the funniest way possible. I mean, it is kind of dry, it is more silly, but I mean, to me, the funniest movies ever made are like the Monty Python films. So, I like things silly for the sake of being silly. And it showed the comedy in this is like, it's definitely for people who love and appreciate the Frankenstein films also. Like when they recreate when the monster meets the little girl throwing the flower petals in the pond, only this is down a well. She's like, oh, no more. Now what should we throw down? And Peter Boyle just kind of looks at the camera like, because fans of Frankenstein that knows what happens, so it's just kind of like a wink to the audience, and it's the way it plays out is very funny. But this is also one of the most cherished comedies ever. I mean, just like with Mel Brooks' other film Blazing Saddles or Ghostbusters, which I would say I do like Ghostbusters more than this, but I grew up with Ghostbusters. There is a stage, a musical that I would love to see. I would love to see the stage play of this. But Gene Wilder, he's got that sort of Leslie Nielsen, like, straight man, like, comedy delivery and timing. Gene Wilder's a comic genius. He is so over the top in some parts, but then again, so was Colin Clive in the Frankenstein films. The look of the film is absolutely beautiful. Like, they would only do this movie if that glare is really not helping anything, is it, guys? I apologize. They would not do this movie if they weren't granted doing it in black and white. And I think I've seen some DVDs that, like, the stills on the back are in color. I don't ever want to see this movie in color. It looks absolutely beautiful the way it does. I mean, the cinematography by... Who was the cinematographer? It's not going to tell me. And my phone is the flashlight, so I can't look it up. But anyway, the cinematographer did a wonderful job at really making this look like a 1931 film. It doesn't just look like a black and white 70s movie. That's what Eraserhead looks like. This looks like a 30s Universal film. I love the look of it. The look of Peter Boyle as the monster, like one of his stitches is like a zipper on his neck. And even some of the finest details, like how you don't see, like, the woman that becomes the bride. You don't see her until, like, the very end of the movie for, like, a second. And all she does is hiss, just the way Elsa Lanchester did in Bride. And, this is one of those movies, kind of like Beetlejuice or Ghostbusters or Jaws, that I don't know how this movie got a PG rating, probably because PG-13 wasn't around back then. But I mean, there are like several dick and erection jokes that they're not like Adam Sandler dick jokes. Like, these ones are actually fucking funny. And it is kind of a dry film, and I'm guessing it's not for everyone. Like, I have friends that won't watch movies just because it's black and white. And those are the same friends that watch, like, blank movie by, like, the Seltzer brothers. So, I don't mean to sound pretentious, but that's just my opinion on, like, spoof comedies. And yeah, I love this movie to death. It is one of my all-time favorite comedies. definitely around the top 5. I mean, I usually group, like, actually, if you go back to my top favorite comedy video that I made months ago, I actually did not own this, but I mentioned it. And I haven't seen this since even before I made that video. It's been a while since I've seen it, and it's still held up. I know I already said that. Just, I mean, if you're a fan of the Universal original Frankenstein movies, you're gonna like this. I mean, you can really tell that Gene Wilder, on top of being the comic acting genius he is, same with Mel Brooks, they're a fan of those movies. And they knew just the right way how to tweak it and make it funny. And be able to appreciate it. I love Young Frankenstein. I gotta go blow my nose, but thank you all for watching.